actually get started recording. Can I go back a slide? Okay, I'm going to go back a slide. Okay. All right. Welcome. Blah, 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 blah. And so I'm going to start, like I always start off, how do you get support for OpenScholar? So if you have yet to go to a training, we have trainings available for people looking to build individual sites or group-based or department-based sites. So we offer trainings. We have a documentation website that highlights, what different widgets are, how to do certain things. Very helpful. We have a community forum. The community forum is where you can go and you can search for topics. You can ask questions. It's kind of a community involvement area. You can report bugs if you want to. The roadmap is where you will see what's coming down the line in terms of feature releases. So we release every 6 weeks. We actually have a release tomorrow, which is very exciting. But that's where you can find out what is happening. And then help desk support. So if you look here and you look here and you go to training and you still need help, you can just email into IT help with your question and your URL, and it gets sent over to our group or the HWP group, and we will help you. And so with that, I'm just going to quickly talk about what is taxonomy. So taxonomy is the idea that you can classify your content. So I'll just read off here. Taxonomy can be used in workflows to customize and define sections of your website to display specific content based on taxonomy terms. Taxonomy gives sites use of organizational keywords known in other systems as categories or tags. It allows you to connect, relate, and classify your website's content. In OpenScholar, these terms are gathered within vocabularies. So a taxonomy, again, is the system of categorizing your website's content. The vocabulary is a group of terms, and then a term is a single word or phrase to describe a piece of content. And so with that, he is up.
Hello everyone, welcome to OpenScholar ABCD. My name is Jing and I'm a student intern. So today I will going to introduce the taxonomy basics. So actually there are 5 basic steps. First, to create a new vocabulary. Second, we add the terms in it. Then we tag the content with the terms. The fourth step, we create taxonomy widget. And last step, we put the widget on the page. And now I'm going to do a demo to use taxonomy to classify people into different groups. And I will use the ABCD-OpenScholar website as my example. In people page here. Also, I want to open 2 tabs because then we can show the difference between 2 pages in the end. So in people page here, we have 3 co-workers, but they do different jobs. Ria and Joe are project support, but Oren is a web developer. So I want to tag them with different roles. So remember, our first step is to create a new vocabulary. What we do is we hover our mouse to build and then click taxonomy. Here we can see all the existing vocabularies. Then we click add vocabulary to create a new one. Here I want to name the new vocabulary as roles. And I want to leave the description as empty, but you can definitely type in anything like. And for content types, here we have a lot of choices because we are trying to classify people, so I will choose person. That's it. We can leave all the other options as default. Click Save. Now the new created vocabulary will come out in this list. So we finished our first step. And the second step is to add terms in this vocabulary. If we click Add Terms, so I want to add a term for Bree and Joe. They are project support. Leave all the other things as default and click Save. The success message come out. And for orange, I want to give him a role as web developer. Exit. Click list terms. You see all the terms we just added. And now we are in our third step, which is to tag the content with the terms. We go back to the people page. For each person here, if we click the gear icon and then choose edit, you can see a gray box here, which it has the associated vocabularies. Here we just have one, which is roles. If we click the text box, you can see all the terms of this vocabulary. So for brief, I will choose project support. Click save. I do the same process for Oren and Joe. Oren is a web developer. Joe, so project support. Okay, now we've done our third step. The fourth step, which is to create a taxonomy widget. What we can do is we click this big gear button and then click layout. Add a new widget here. Choose the second entry, taxonomy. I want to name this, I want to give this widget a description as rows taxonomy widget, and give the title filter by. For vocabularies, definitely we will choose rows. Leave all the other options as default. We can click save. Now it comes to our final step, which is to put the widget on the page. It's easy. We can just drag this widget and put whatever you want on the page. Normally we will put it on the right sidebar. There's a filter. And click save, which will bring us back to the people page. If we compare with current page to the original page, oh sorry, because it's updated like that. We can see the new created taxonomy widget on the right side. And if we click project support, Bree and Joe come out. If we click web developer, you can see Oren here. So that's it. We follow the steps and we're done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. So next we're going to have Peter Brown. He's going to talk about the events section of the economics department. So here we go, Peter. To your page. There you go.
Thank you, Bree. Hi, everybody. I'm the systems manager in the economics department, and then we work with Bree and Mary and Nilagia and all the group in developing this website. And we found we've used taxonomy in a variety of cases, but I think one of the most important ones is our events pages. Our use case was to figure out how to present in a clear and quick info about all the many departmental events that we have. Events not including classes, but seminars, workshops, stuff like that. The information will be, the sort of typical who, what, where, and when kind of stuff. And another question which seemed important was, since there are 400 of them, how do we sort according to what events might be interesting to me or to you specifically? In order to give you an idea of who we are, Econ is the largest FAS academic department. We have 55 full-time faculty, 33, at the moment 33 affiliated emeritus or visiting faculty, some 600 undergrad concentrators, some 275 grad students, at the moment about 25 visiting scholars / fellows, and 18 officially recognized fields of study. And those fields of study are what we used in thinking about taxonomy for the events schedule. As I said, some 400 seminars, workshops, special lectures, job talks, etc. And all of these events are entered by our staff. Basically, faculty assistants, I would say, do 98% of it. The question was, as I said, how to organize that stuff so that not only we have a chronological list, but if I'm not interested in the entire list, let's say I'm interested in econometrics, how can I look at this events calendar and not just get completely boondoggled by all this stuff? This is kind of a joke. After much probing analysis and deep thought, we came up with the following recommendation. Let's look at what MIT is doing. The truth, there's some pretty smart people over at MIT. We decided. Actually, it was Ann Richards, one of our FAs, who knew the MIT website very well, and she recommended that we go and look at the MIT events calendar, and I'm hoping that this will come up. It looks like there's not much going on at MIT this week, but as you'll see over here, there are all these different categories of events. And that was essentially the idea that we wanted to rip off. So if I go back here, oh geez, what am I doing? View center. So event led us, so Ann led us to that idea. I'm not getting a response to my key. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry. So here's the end result. When you go to our events page, you'll see that we have something that looks a lot like the MIT events page. We have all these seminars and events over on the left-hand side. We have, beginning with applied theory, behavioral and experimental, contracts and organizations, econometrics. So you can, if you're, let's say I'm, as I said, interested in econometrics, and I don't care about all this other stuff, this game theory stuff, for example, I just go and click on econometrics, and I can see if there's anything happening in that field that day, or what the next thing coming up is likely to be. So that's kind of a simple description of how we're using the fields taxonomy. To benefit from the taxonomy, our events fall into at least of the 18 official categories, and the category was determined by the office of the department chair. That wasn't something that the IT people sat around and made up. That came down from on high about what the categories were gonna be. So that was actually pretty easy. We just turned around to the chair and said, what should this be? So when you create an event, gonna go here. Let's say I'm gonna pretend I'm creating this event. I can find a little thing. This, it might be, it's a little hard for me to see here. But so this is, so when you go to, so you create the title, you put in the date, you put in when it start, this one might not. So, location is not a good example because there's actually no seminar. Let's pretend there's a seminar there. And as you scroll down, you see, because of the vocabulary created by Bree, really, I think, have this seminar events. Vocabulary is the right thing,
Yep,
right?
those are all listed terms.
So those are the listed terms, and all you have to do is click on behavioral and experimental, and then you scroll on down, you click save, and you're all set. When you go back, our site's not usually this slow, I want you to know. So in that case, that thing, when you click on behavioral and experimental, if that's what interests you, you're going to see that non-event coming up there. No seminar held this week. So that, I mean, it's a very simple thing, but really it's a very, in terms of the way that we function, it's a very powerful, and helped us tremendously in simplifying the organization of our events. As I said, a complex administrative task simplified in a way that's very useful. The internal needs that are met is this is something that we use a lot, faculty, staff, and students. You are constantly looking at this. External needs, it seems to me interesting if I was a prospective recruit, I think this events calendar, especially if it was something in the field that I was interested in, behavioral, for example, it would be a very quick and very informative way to see what's going on at our department. I also think it's a sort of general public use for the world at large to come and see. You know, if we have some 400 events a year, to be able to come through and sort through them very easily and see who's doing what people are talking about, what's really happening in the world of economics. And I'd be delighted to take anybody's questions.
I think we'll kind of lump all the questions together because Gretchen's going to come up now and she'll talk about sociology and their research clusters that they have applied taxonomy to, and then you're kind of getting more and more of an understanding of taxonomy. We'll talk about all the questions sort of at the end.
I'm Gretchen Gingo from the Department of Sociology, and ours was one of the pilot sites that was done launched last March. And first, I'd like to give all credit for our research cluster taxonomy to Joe Weiner. He's the one who figured out how to achieve our goals. So with our research clusters, we were really looking for a way to highlight the strengths of the department. It's really primarily directed at external audiences, prospective graduate students and potential faculty hires, or researchers at large who are wanting to understand what's going on in the Department of Sociology at Harvard. And like the economics department, we were looking at several of our peer departments at our top competitors and seeing that they had content on their site that was organized by research areas or presented things similar to research clusters. And so we kind of stole that idea from them, thinking that it was a great way to present research in our department. So the primary external need being met is to show visitors what are the strengths of the department, who's working in each of these different areas, and what activities are going on at any moment, both events within the department and what news is going on, what awards have been won, what articles have been published. And then it also ends up signaling areas of weakness for the department. So, for example, when we look at the research cluster page, you'll see one of the things that's not there is demography. So if you're a sociologist who's really interested in doing demography, Harvard is probably not a great place for you. And that was very intentional because you don't want graduate students coming to your department where there's not a good fit. So it's a really easy way for them to be able to see, based on their areas of interest, who else is there. They can also see, when you're looking at our cluster pages, even though it says we have a cluster in health and population, when you look, we only have 7 faculty in that area, whereas if you look at inequality, we've got 22 faculty. So it really makes it very easy to see the relative strengths of different research areas in our department. And that can be a drawback in recruiting faculty because they were trying to ramp up and really increase demography in our department. Potential faculty hires are looking and saying, oh, Harvard sociology is not so good at this. Maybe I don't want to be there where I won't have a community of So it cuts both ways. So for internal needs, it helps graduate students identify potential faculty collaborators in their areas of interest, and it also provides an easy way to identify events going on in areas of interest. So we use our research cluster tags also on our events page. So the way our research cluster pages look is that, and I'm just going to take us right to the site. So we've got 10 different research clusters, and each page has a static image and a description of what we think that cluster means. It'll typically also have links to related workshops, but then it has all the news going on in this area, all of the associated faculty with the area, all the related publications that have been listed by faculty, and related events that are upcoming. So it really pulls together everything in the department that's going on in that area. So it means that basically any post that is put on our website is tagged by a research cluster. So we have to be really meticulous about that, and when people submit things, making sure that they're adding those tags, otherwise it won't get pulled into this page. But this is all done using lists of posts. So each of these is a list of posts widgets that is filtered by the particular research cluster and by a type of post. So this is people, publications, events, and news. And then you can also see on our events page that you can view events by research cluster. So if you're a current affiliated department looking at what's going on in these different areas, you can just easily pull events by the cluster.
So next, Nilagia McCoy is going to come up and speak to best practices in using taxonomy. Great. Yeah. Okay, so we have a question, sorry, I'm repeating for the people for the WebEx, but the question is to export events into Outlook. So what is the status of exporting to iCal? I think you can do it up to 30 days.
Right, yeah. So that's a standard that a lot of military services. So we haven't already tried. There's those three links that will appear in the events section on your website, and those one of those three should work for Outlook. I personally haven't tried it, but
So if you go here, see these things, subscribe, iCal. So you click on this link, you'll have the ability to export, and then you would import from iCal. Is that a problem? I was told not. I'm not sure. We can definitely talk about that in the last 10 minutes we are going to, as usual, talk about individual questions, so we can talk about that events, and then we'll just finish up with taxonomy.
All right, so I'm going to go over some best practices and tips that will be useful if you are in the process of structuring a taxonomy for your site. So I'll get into a little bit of detail on each one of these, just some considerations and questions to ask yourself as you're putting together a taxonomy. So the first thing that you want to evaluate is whether it makes sense to use a controlled vocabulary versus free tags. OpenScholar does support both of those methods, and there are pros and cons to each. For many of your sites, probably using a controlled vocabulary, which is what we saw for sociology and economics, that's going to be the best option, and that's just a screen grab from the HWP site versus free tags. If you think of a site like YouTube, where if you're a content creator, you can just create your tags on the fly. And sort of the pros and cons of each are that a controlled vocabulary is typically going to be easier for your content creators. They don't have to worry about what should I label this particular piece of content. It's also much more reliable as far as retrieval goes for your site visitors, so they don't have to worry about, well, if I click on international affairs, is that the same as diplomacy or, you know, some other category that might seem similar? They know that they're getting everything related to that particular topic. And it's also a little easier to maintain. On the other hand, there are some instances where it might make sense to use free tags. It is easier, like I said, to tag things on the fly. If you had a site that was, you know, very heavily focused on news, you're constantly putting out very timely content, you know, you might want to be able to tag something with a tag like election 2012, and so maybe it's something a little out of the ordinary, and you'd like to be able to draw attention to that and direct users toward that content. If you had, you know, really large volumes of user-generated content, again, YouTube is an example of that. That's a good strategy, but it is also less consistent and reliable for retrieval, as I alluded to. So sort of in a nutshell, controlled vocabulary is typically the way that you're going to want to go, but you can have a little bit of mixing and matching of the two if you do have some of those situations that I mentioned previously. Next thing you want to take into consideration is really sort of what is the structure going to be for the hierarchical relationships, and essentially what is the organizing principle for the vocabulary and the terms that you're putting together. And ideally, each term in a vocabulary should have the same relationship. So here are a few common ways of thinking about that. And just as a side note, BT stands for broader term, NT is narrower term. Those are sort of more, you know, traditional taxonomy constructs. But essentially in OpenScholar, you would think of maybe the broader term as being a parent term, a narrow term as being a child term, or the broad term is the vocabulary as a whole, so maybe trees, and then your terms within that are more specific examples of those, of trees, or whatever your situation might be. Another way to think about it is a whole versus a part. And then, of course, you know, there are all sorts of different ways you could have relationships between the terms and their parent vocabulary. So that's essentially called a custom semantic relationship. So in this case, you could have something like Apple is the producer, and then the child terms are products, things like iPad, iPhone, etc. Long story short, the thing is you really just want to make sure, can you put all of the terms in your vocabulary in a sentence with the same structure? So if we take a look at this example, this is just something I made up here. You could see easily which one of these is not like the other. And that's not to say that you couldn't have two vocabularies and, you know, maybe one vocabulary is focused on services and another is focused on audiences, but you typically want to avoid mixing and matching those in the same space because it will be more confusing for your end users. You also want to think about, does a concept warrant a term? So just going on to this example, for something like diplomacy and trade agreements, could that go under one larger term, or do they need to be separate terms? And some things to look for in that regard is really, what is the volume of your content? Are you going to have one category that has 50 items and another that only has 2? You know, if you see that a given category might have tons of content, might it make sense to possibly divvy it up into smaller subdivisions? And also, we really want to keep in mind, what are the terms that your users are going to be looking for? And so, you know, you might want to think about what are industry standard terms that are used in your field. If you're an academic department, what kinds of terms are other sites using? Looking at your search analytics, what are the users that you're going after looking for? Also, I want to keep in mind the size of the vocabulary, so sort of balancing depth and breadth. A general rule of thumb is maybe no more than about 3 levels deep. I've read maybe, 8 terms per level is also sort of a helpful rule of thumb. It really is going to depend, though, also on the look of your site and what the user interface looks like. So are you going to have people scrolling and scrolling and scrolling to get through all of your terms, or clicking and clicking and clicking? So in either case, you want to avoid extremes on either one of those ends. Then term, format, and wording. Always just want to make sure that wording is consistent within your vocabulary, so we're using plural or singular nouns or action verbs, and think about how the wording of your terms fits in with the tone of your overall site, and again, what your audience is looking for. So investments versus investing. Investing is a little more action-oriented. Doctors versus physicians. Physicians is maybe a little more formal. And then finally, just a few resources. This is a book. There's also a blog by Heather Hedden. She also teaches at Simmons. I did a continuing education class with her a while ago that covered taxonomy, and so that's where I borrowed some of these basic principles for, but that's a pretty good resource. You can sort of pick and choose things in that book that might be more applicable to websites particularly. And then also I would really recommend just taking a look at organizational schemes that are used on larger sites. For example, the Library of Congress. And if we send out this presentation, that link will take you directly to the portion of their website that has their full taxonomy. So you can sort of get a sense of what other institutions are using in terms of how they categorize their content.
So we'll do Q&A for taxonomy-related stuff for, I guess, about 5-10 minutes, and then we'll open up to, get regular help with some of the other site-specific questions. So because we're recording this, if you have questions, I'll repeat them, and then we'll point it out to whoever wants to answer, and then maybe they could just come closer to the microphone. So who has a question about taxonomy? Specific to maybe what you've seen, or you want to see the back end of any kind of site? Yeah.
I see you're creating vocabulary. The vocabulary needs to be for single content type.
So the question is, if you create a vocabulary, will it be for a single content type? And so the answer is that you can apply the vocabulary to multiple content types if you'd like. In some of the cases, they were choosing just one content type, like in Chi's example, he was applying a role-based or a job-based role to people, individuals, people with the content type. But in Gretchen's case with research clusters, you'll see that she's been able to apply diplomacy, was that one of them? Apples, to both people, news, events. Those terms could be cross-applied. So you could choose one or you could choose 4 different types of content. And then as we saw, when you open up a piece of content, that taxonomy area will be visible for tagging.
Do you have an example of a multi-layer taxonomy?
I think it's Gretchen's. I actually haven't worked. So we're thinking about where the question is a multi-layered. Okay. Set of people. Should I look in this, or should I look at this one person? Should I open him up?
Well, if you look at this just as a navigation.
Oh, okay.
So those are the different layers.
Yeah.
You break out other faculty into categories.
Great. Look at that. So
that's all one vocabulary?
That's all one vocabulary.
if we take it a step further, and let me just skew this, and we look at how her taxonomy is built here. So we're going into build and then taxonomy, and then we'll go down to current people, and then we'll see the list of terms. You'll see that how we've got sociology faculty, other faculty, and then see how these are nested inside of other faculty. So it's a more complex way versus Chi's original first way of doing that. So that's an example of that. And I also forgot, and Oren forgot to remind me that he was going to demo something on the fly, because we have a release coming out tomorrow. So there's some taxonomy-related widget coming. And so Oren, why don't you come up and you can demo it and explain what it is and what it will do and how it will maybe help.
Sure. This is, what I'm about to introduce is called a faceted taxonomy widget. Does anyone know what faceted taxonomy might mean? Okay. So, has anyone used Amazon before, the website? So Amazon and a lot of big shopping sites will have a way that you can basically filter down multiple different categories. So you can say, you know, large shoes with many colors, and you'll narrow down your search as you go. I'll just show you basically what that's going to look like by demoing on. Let's actually take a look at one of these ones we've done so far today. The economic site has a lot of different tags in their fields, and there's actually a little hidden way you can preview this. Not linked anywhere, so don't tell anyone. So the widget will be available in your regular widgets bar. It's called faceted taxonomy instead of just plain old taxonomy. And what it will do is it'll generate something like this, same way that you've seen the taxonomy widgets. Now previously, if you click on one of these, it's sort of like you're navigating between sections. You know, I'm looking at public policy now, and then if I click on labor, I'll just see labor and have no public policy unless they're double tagged. But now, if we were to click on, let's say, labor, for example, it's just going to narrow down the results. So now we've got anything that's been tagged with labor, and in addition to that, we can look at further refining our search. So let's say public policy, and there might even be some stragglers left after this one. And so this is a different sort of model for content discovery on your site, and yeah, it's pretty exciting. Were there any other questions around this?
I did have one regarding economics identification. Peter, I didn't know if it understood exactly how the categories were showing up on the identification. Is that a standard taxonomy widget, or is that
I believe this is a standard taxonomy widget. There's a checkbox in the widget that says display this as a section navigation versus as sociology, a little hierarchical list.
Right, so yeah, so the question is, we go back, the question from Michael was, this looks like navigation. You know, so it's confusing because we've seen like on the people from the first example of just our, you know, project support and then web developer, we see that it looks different than this. And that's because if I were to go into this widget, which is a taxonomy widget, and we know that it'll tell us here, we've opted to show it as a display of navigation. So if I didn't click this, it would show up as just lists of terms. But this sort of provides a little styling. You can also do something like show number of posts. If I were to click this, it would show in parentheses after that term in that list view, it would show how many were within there. But it depends on how much you want to show. So that is the answer for that. Yeah, Adrian.
I have a question about the faceted. So is it like really now like labor and something like whatever tags both? Okay, cool.
And in addition to those, you can have it across multiple categories. So if you have different audience and a service, that kind of vocabulary, say, you know, what is this category, this vocabulary, and also research.
Nobody can hear that, but so the question was, we saw Oren drill down, and so yes, in fact, that, you know, we went into labor and then we went into public policy, and then the two that they have in common are what's left in this list, and there's two of them inside of monetary and fiscal. So it's drilling down, just like on Zappos.com. I'm looking for a boot that's brown, size 9. You know what I mean? So that is what it does.
So this is based on the assumption that you can hit more than one term for an event.
Right.
Which, actually, I don't even know if we can. Or have we always been able to do that?
You can tag your content with more than one, but in the real, this is just a demo of what's coming out. In the real one, you can only, like Oren was saying, if you were to click, wait for it.
But it has to be tagged with
Yes.
all three of those terms.
Right.
For it to go from there.
So if I were to do behavioral and experimental, and I see results, the first result on the list would be, you know, this games market seminar, but let's say it was also part of financial, I wouldn't be able to know that. I would just be able to, I would have to click another area. The way that Oren showed you, you'd be able to drill down and sort of see where they have like. happening tomorrow. It will be available in your widget area. So if you're in your layout, it will be a new widget in the Add New Widget area. You'll be able to see it here. Yes, it'll be in the miscellaneous right here. Yeah, great. What other questions do we have? Yes?
Question about the layout. I had a recent conversation with Nilagia about this, and I investigated all the forums, topics that may relate to it, but right now there's very little flexibility in how the code is your own. That's when you less than taxonomy, secondary term. I'm wondering what conversations you have right now that might something that would be helpful.
No?
For example, I've seen a website that has like tile-based posts.
Sure.
It's really down to a much smaller area on the website, but it's actually part one.
It's true. So as she's saying here, we see a list of, in this case, events. And so they're all in a list, and she's asking what other display options might be coming down that could be gridded or something like that. I don't have the answers. Anyone over here? Or come over here and answer into the magic box.
Sure. So that community forum URL that was on the first slide, if you were to go there, there's actually, I think, 2 or 3 topics relating to these really big, exciting enhancements we're making to the vocabulary system. Previously, there really wasn't any way to style a page or an individual term beyond just a few tweaks. But going forward, there will be, you can change the post style from just a title to possibly a grid. That's one of the ideas that's being proposed in the forum, to a hierarchical list of grids, and lots of flexibility. So I encourage you to go to that forum topic and star the ones that you like or make a comment.
Here. So the question from Leanne to Gretchen was, how did you come up with your research clusters? How long did it take you to develop, and something else?
So our process was a little bit more involved than economics, but it was similar. So our chair did the first pass of drafting a list. Then it went out to the faculty. There was a lot of conversation. We revised the list a few times and settled on a list. And then we recruited faculty to write the descriptions. But we had to do it fairly quickly because of the timeline to launch. So I think having the deadlines helps.
Is there any process you're going through to like reassess like on an annual basis your clusters, or does it not really change so much?
The clusters ended up being fairly broad, so I don't think that we'll need to change the names of clusters. We are planning on each summer doing a review of the description for the clusters. So the site didn't launch until late March last year, so our first review will be this summer. That's the time we'll also go through like the related publications. We only let each faculty member list 3 publications on our site, and so we'll give them an opportunity to update those publications as well.
So I think what we'll do is we'll open up what we do every meeting, which is like if you have a site-specific question, you raise your hand, and someone usually on this side of the room kind of goes over to that side of the room and helps. But we're trying to encourage more and more that like people in the middle would help each other, just as part of the community. So I think we'll do that. We'll probably stop recording because nobody will be able to hear what we're doing. And so if you have questions, raise your hand, and then somebody will come over and help you.